Happy late Halloween, everyone. So, normally for the past 2 years, this would have been the 3rd year, I carve a pumpkin on my channel for Halloween. And I'm really mad that I didn't get to do that this year. I have a 50-pound plus pumpkin outside my house that we actually grew that I never got a chance to carve. But that's because I was busy making these shoes. Look at them in all their glory for my Halloween costume this year. So I decided to be Emma Bloom from Ransom Riggs' Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. That is a tongue twister. I actually did the Tim Burton movie version because I haven't read the books, but I liked the character's visual look in the movie. Her peculiarity is that she's lighter than air. I think that's how you would describe it. So she needs lead boots to weigh her down to the ground, and these are modeled after the boots she wore in the movie. Disclaimer right away, not 100% movie accurate. The bottom half is about as close as I could get using pictures, and then the straps and the whole top bit was a time crunch, and then error, and then broken pieces, and so forth and so on. I think the overall look is well enough for pictures and things like that, but I definitely think I'll go back in the future and, you know, sort of fix up the top half. But the bottom half I'm really pleased with. And I'm not just here to tell you, hey, I made these, that's why I didn't carve a pumpkin. I actually filmed the entire time I was making these, or as close to the entire time as I could get, because I thought it would be helpful if anyone ever wanted to try and make this costume, or if anyone wanted a different way of making platform boots. You could definitely just use my starting process and then go off from there of however you wanted to make them yourself. I had a lot of fun making these, so I thought we could just go along and I will explain to you guys how it went. Now, there's a couple different ways you can go about making platform shoes. I will link some of the YouTube videos I watched below on how I got the idea to start mine. There's definitely some that are better than others, but I think it comes down to what you can find for supplies and then the time and the tools you have as well. I sort of went with a combo method. I liked the idea of using sandals as the base for the shoe to make the platform, but all the suggestions are using those 99-cent flip-flops you can get at, you know, Kmart or Old Navy or so forth. But I started these shoes in the middle of October, so those were not in stores anymore, and I ended up actually finding 2 pairs of platform sandals from Kmart. So each one is probably about half as thick as this base right here, which ended up working out, I think, a lot better for me than I would have been doing if I had done the thin flip-flops, because I only had to adhere 3 things, you know, sandal, sandal, shoe on top, rather than doing 4 or 5 layers of the thin flip-flops. And I think it gives you a sturdier base because these shoes have like the built-in curve, they have an actual solid core, rather than being, you know, just a foam flip-flop. To make my base, I used contact cement, which I would highly recommend for attaching them. Hot glue just doesn't cut it on these foamy materials. And I have a clip here of me attaching them. I did the 2 sandals together first, and I did 1 layer of contact cement, let it dry, 2nd layer of contact cement, and then attached. What I didn't really plan out ahead was making sure everything lined up perfectly, so I had to attempt to pull them up and off and reapply. I should have traced them out first to make sure I had the perfect fit, which I ended up doing later when I attached the shoe to the sandals, which is how I would suggest going about it. Also, just read the instructions on whatever material you're using to adhere them. My contact cement said to wait however long and do this and do that, so that's what I did. Every brand, it can be slightly different, so just follow along with the instructions. After I attached each layer from sandal to sandal and shoe, I weighed them down with a 25-pound weight that I have at my house. It's a big round one that will go on a barbell, so it applies even pressure over the entire shoe, which is definitely needed, at least in my case, because the curves of the shoes meant that the contact cement wanted to lift in some places where if you're standing in it or putting pressure on it, the shoe would be in contact, but when there's no weight on it, it doesn't have that contact, and I knew I needed that to get a very secure base, so I weighed them down and would leave them for anywhere from half an hour to overnight for them to fully dry. So once my sandals were attached, I attached the shoe, very much the same process, although for the shoe I didn't bother covering the entire bottom of the shoe. Obviously in the arch of the foot I knew that wasn't going to connect, so I didn't bother wasting the contact cement, and I just attached it with the same process and then weighed it down overnight with a 25-pound weight. So after I had all my shoes attached, you can see that the shape of the outside is not as smooth as it could be. So to fill out the shape of the shoe, I decided to attach seat foam, that thicker, usually green foam that you would use to pad chairs and things like that. And to get the shape I needed for the foam, I made a pattern out of 2 pieces of paper, and I just lightly held it around the shoe, traced out the shape I needed. Once I decided the pattern was close enough, I traced it out onto the foam. I added about ½ an inch just in case. Definitely not needed. I think it made my life a lot harder. I didn't factor in that once you're gluing it on, the foam has a good amount of stretch to it, so I probably could have just stretched it in places that it didn't exactly match, but that's what I did. Wouldn't suggest it, but there you go. I used the same contact cement method to attach the large foam to the outside of the shoe. It definitely took a lot more layers and more contact cement overall because the foam just absorbs the contact cement like no one's business. And actually, when I was attaching the foam to the front half of the shoes, the contact cement for some reason was not working at all. I don't know if it was a difference in temperatures. It was getting really cold at night when I was doing this, so maybe that was playing into it. But the actual foam of the sandals was just absorbing the contact cement so much that after, I would apply one shoe, I'd do the next one, I'd go back to the first shoe, and you could touch the shoe like nothing was on it at all. So it ended up taking a lot more time, but I eventually just got the shoes covered in so much contact cement and just slapped on the foam and then weighed it down completely overnight to give it as much time as possible for it to adhere, which ended up working very nicely. This is also when I discovered that I definitely should not have used 1-inch foam. You can see here I'm trying to cut it down to shape because it was overreaching the shoe by so much. It was a lot thicker than I had anticipated it being. I wanted originally it to be thicker so that way I could shave down the top and get a more sloped angle. As I started cutting into it, I realized that was most definitely not going to happen. I don't know if I would have been better off trying to sand it, but that was just not an option for me at the time. And I definitely at this point wanted to just throw the shoes in the trash and give up 100% and just act like I had never even started the project. But my mom, in a fit of my rage, managed to find a box cutter in our house. And we were going to originally use it to just cut off all the foam and just do without the foam overall. But we discovered that if you slice from the bottom of the shoe up towards the top, you could get a good slice in, and then going sideways, you could peel off entire layers of the foam at a time, which definitely was a lot quicker than using any other tool, and it gave me the shape I wanted. So if you were going to do this yourself, I suggest don't use foam that thick. It's a lot easier if you got a thinner foam, and then in places that you needed to build it up, just add more. But, to each their own. With all the foam cut down to size, that gave me a good base to work off of for my shoe. And so next was applying all the craft foam to the outside. Now I will leave links below to a couple different YouTube channels that were amazing to watch to figure out how to use the craft foam for my needs. One is the channel of a guy, I don't remember his name right now, but it'll be in the description, who makes the most amazing props and costumes out of only craft foam. Insanely inspiring, very cool to watch. And the other is a random YouTube video I found about how you can heat the craft foam to shape it to your needs. Some people suggest using hair dryers or heat guns. Hair dryers I didn't feel like would give me a very good even heat, and I don't have a heat gun. But this YouTube video suggested you can iron craft foam if you put something in between it, and it will heat it up enough to make it pliable. What it doesn't say is that the craft foam gets so hot. We only ironed over it for about 3 seconds and it would be almost too hot to touch, so definitely watch out for that. The first time we just ironed away for a good couple seconds, not really paying attention, and when we picked it up, it honestly burned our fingers, so just be careful. But as you can see here, my mom and I, because she was my little assistant for most of this project, ironed the craft foam and then wrapped it around the shoe. We also at this point realized that doing it the rounded edges was going to be almost impossible. So I was very lucky that in the design there are seams down the front and back center. So we ended up splitting the craft foam into fourths and doing it that way. We just heated up the craft foam and then pressed it to the shoe and held it on in place until it cooled to the touch. It doesn't look like it molded that much from it, and I know looking at it ourselves, it didn't really look like it was making that much of a difference, but when it came to gluing it on, it made a world of difference. Just that little bit of curve the heat gave the craft foam made it so much easier to mold it to the shoe. So I would highly recommend heating it however you can. You can iron it, you can, hair dryer it, whatever you have. It makes a world of difference when it comes to how easy it is to apply. I'm sure, you could force it, but heating it helps a lot. I also just used a regular old hot glue gun to apply this craft foam, and the heat from the hot glue gun actually also helped stretch out the foam. So, if you're in a pinch and you're hot gluing it, if you go slowly enough, the heat from the hot glue gun will actually allow it to stretch that little bit. So you could probably just hot glue it and then just sort of push as you go. But like I said, heating it up first does help out a lot. After attaching all the cover foam, which is all of the side paneling and the top, I went in and I just attached all the seaming, which again, that was just thin strips of the craft foam that I didn't even heat up. It was just thin enough that it would form the shape well, and I just hot glued it all on, just following the shape in the pictures I had. The corners, were cut out separately. It was just sort of a feel it out as I went along and just sort of find the shapes that fit. At this point, I would also like to mention, because I forgot before, this was the only picture I had to go on for almost the entire process of making these shoes. There was no good photos of the shoes out yet, and so I only had stills from the trailer which showed the shoes mid-opening and from a almost 100% front on, slightly side view. So that was what I was basing everything off of. Annoyingly enough, right after I applied all the craft foam, when these photos of the Hollywood props came out, which was thankfully not too late that I didn't know to apply this extra piece at the back. It does, though, slightly explain why my shape is off. I had originally thought that the shoes ended here and that this was the indented shape, when in reality the shoes come all the way up the back of the heel, and this is the indented shape. So, slightly annoying, but hey, now they're out there. Now, after I had all of this seaming done, I decided to make the rivets. I don't know where I got this idea from, but I decided I was going to mold them with hot glue. So I bought just 99-cent Sculpey clay, rolled it out, and then using a little sculpting tool, made half circles and filled them with hot glue. You can see me doing that here right now. It was a great idea. I have to, toot my own horn and say it worked out amazingly. It's really annoying to clean off all of the clay. Even though I baby powdered the entire thing, it would still stick a lot, but that wasn't such a problem overall. If you were going to do this and you didn't want it to be dyed whatever color of the clay, I would just say pick white clay, because there was a purple tinting to all of my hot glue once I was done. After I did all the riveting, it was time to do all of the filigree work, which is the thing that took probably the longest on these entire shoes. It took me about maybe 2 hours per shoe to draw on the filigree, and then it took a total of 8 hours to engrave it all. I used a small Dremel that I got at, I think it was Harbor Freight, for like $8. It came with 80 different tips that you could use, so I just tested them out on some spare foam and then got to carving. I just threw on something on the TV and just carved and carved and carved. It is a long process. It didn't feel long when I was doing it, but all of a sudden I looked up and I realized I had just spent 5 hours straight just carving into this foam. There's no real tips or tricks I can give you, just sort of test it out on a spare piece, and the longer you go, the better you get at it. It took me about 45 minutes for each back panel, probably 30 minutes for the front panels, and maybe 20 for this little piece up there. So approximately 3.5 hours per shoe, maybe 2.5 if I wasn't getting too distracted. It just takes a long time. There's nothing that can really speed it up. The one thing I would suggest is if you're trying to make these exact shoes, if at all possible, see if you can carve the filigree in before you attach the craft foam to the shoe. It goes a lot faster when the foam is flat. You don't have to worry about getting around all of these curves, which I think is probably what makes it take so long. It also means that the foam is, because it's all flat, you're making sure it's all at an even thickness. There was parts where doing some of these deeper pieces, the Dremel went straight through because I didn't realize I was carving in so deeply because of the curve of the shoe. So just watch out for stuff like that. And if you could do it when it's all out flat, that would be even better. But if not, you know, it can be done. Then I didn't film this part, but to make this filigree right here, I actually just used the exact same process I used to make all the rivets. I just carved in a pattern into some clay and then filled it with hot glue. The one thing is, with the rivets, the top half of my little mold was flat, and then it was the indented portion that actually became the rivet. On the filigree, I didn't carve it deep enough, so this is actually the top of the hot glue, which didn't really make a difference. You can make it deeper and probably have a cleaner side out, but you know, I think it turned out pretty alright, so I was happy with that. Next up was spray painting both shoes entirely black. I gave them both 2 full coats of spray paint and then let them completely dry overnight because I knew I was going to be painting over it and I did not want it mixing in. You could probably get away with not doing the black, but I think it gives the metallics a depth that it wouldn't really have, and also it just covers up any mistakes you made, and especially sections like these where there's a gap in the shoe, purposefully, it does just help, you know, hide it away and make it look like it's not there. And then as you can see here, I painted all of these shoes metallic. I just got a metallic paint from AC Moore. I lightly brushed over the entire shoe in that paint. Very lightly. I still wanted it to, again, have a depth with the black, so some portions weren't as fully covered as others. I then went over with the same metallic paint all of the seam work and the rivets and fully covered them so no black was visible. And then using 2 different metallic paints, I have a much brighter silver and a sort of middle silver. I did some detail work. Like I covered all of this top filigree right here in the much brighter silver so it would pop off of the base more. I went over all of the rivets and brushed over those with the light silver so they would pop. And then using the 2 different tones of silver, I went in and did detail work around almost all of the filigree so it would look like the light was hitting the high points a little bit more. Probably not necessary in the sunlight. The metallic paint definitely gives off that metal feel, but I do think it helps it out that little bit if you wanted to spend extra time doing so. And now we get to my least favorite part of the shoes, and you can tell I was having a hard time with this because I didn't film anything. A lot of this was trial by error as I went along. A lot of it ended up just being error, and so I was just getting really frustrated and didn't film it. But I covered the entirety of the tops of the shoes, all of this stuff right here, in a black faux leather skirt I got at Goodwill. I think it was originally from Forever 21, but got it for like $5 at Goodwill. And so I cut that up and covered the the remaining bits of the shoe, which that was pretty okay, not too bad. My biggest mistake came in attempting to make these straps. I used craft foam again to make these, which I used it because I didn't want the straps to get too floppy when they weren't fully closed over, and not a bad idea on its own, but I doubled up the layers of craft foam and then covered them in Gorilla duct tape, because then when it was painted over with the flat black spray paint, it definitely gives it a leathery feel because I ran out of the faux leather. But it means that these shoes can't actually close. These little attachments right here, which are just wire that I painted silver, can't support the weight of the strap when you try to close them. It's annoying. For pictures, I don't think it really matters, but you know, I think maybe in the new year I'll go back and rework the straps using like a faux leather and maybe some interfacing to give it the stiffness, but make it so they can bend a bit easier. Also attaching these, I was in a rush. I was doing this yesterday morning, Halloween morning, so I just used a combination of super glue and hot glue. Doesn't work at all. As soon as you try and close it, it just snaps off multiple times. So, you know, definitely would need more work. I think if you were doing it with the faux leather, you could stitch through it and stitch around with a metal looking wire, like a silver wire. But, you know, like I said, for photos, it works out all right. Probably one of my proudest parts of the shoe, even though it's on a disappointing section, are these little embellishments right here. Again, they're not movie accurate, but they're like the closest I could get to the feel of it. And they're actually each based off of these ones right here. On the bottom strap of each shoe, there is one of the real metal pieces that I bought. This is a closure that I got at Joann Fabrics, and I actually used the same method to make the rest of them as I did with the rivets and filigree. I pressed it into clay and then filled the little mold that it made with hot glue. The most annoying bit is picking all of the little pieces of clay out of all the little indents. That probably took, you know, half an hour per each one, which also can tell you why my shoe's missing 2 additional straps. But it actually worked out really well in the end. I just spray painted them black and then brushed over them with the same, you know, various metallic paints as I did for the rest of the shoe, and I really like it. I definitely would use that process again. It is a cheap and easy way to do mold making. It's 99-cent clay and then just hot glue, which I think anyone can have. And you, I'm guessing, could probably do that method for just about anything you wanted to make a quick and easy mold of. So yeah, that is essentially all of my shoe. I'm just looking over it, and this shows you how annoying the straps are. This just fell off as I was filming this. Another reason why I think the straps are a poor piece on this shoe is the fact that the spray paint makes it really hard to attach things to it. So if you could get a piece of fabric that is the correct color and not have to spray paint it, 100% the way to go. Because look at this, like nothing wants to attach to the spray paint. Like the spray paint just peels off, sticks to the hot glue, and then that's just like the duct tape showing through now. So what can you do? Oh, and these are actually, I think in the clip of me attaching the shoes, you can see me cutting off the front section of the shoes. Those are just left over from that when it had lacing. So I used that thinking I would be able to close these. Like I said, you can't. Yeah, that is my DIY Emma Bloom shoes. If you wanted to use these to make other platform shoes, you definitely can. If you wanted to make an Emma Bloom costume, you definitely could. And yeah, so that was that. Sorry there was no pumpkin carving this year. Won't even apologize for not making videos. But I'm Emma, and this has been Falling to My Doom, a place where these shoes, this half isn't falling in despair, but this half, we'll have to see how it ends up. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys later.